schools will never teach you this.
Hercules, Heracles. You know, the guy who slayed hydras, held up the sky, and made Demigod NG look like a cakewalk? Yeah, that's the one. But what if I told you there's more to this hero's story than just his impressive bicep curls and godly good looks? What if I told you that behind the myth, the legend, and the iconic Nemean lion skin cape lies a complex, troubled, and downright relatable figure? Well, buckle up, folks, because we're about to dive into the bitter truth, the dark side of Hercules. Hercules, the son of Zeus, the king of the gods, and a mortal woman, Alcmene. You'd think that with a god as a father, life would be a breeze, right? Wrong. Hercules' life was a roller coaster of drama, tragedy, and, well, more drama. And yet, we've come to know him as the quintessential hero, the epitome of bravery, and the poster child for Greek mythology. But what about the other side of the coin? What about the Hercules who struggled with anger issues, who made mistakes, and who faced vulnerabilities just like the rest of us mere mortals? For centuries, we've been fed a watered-down version of Hercules' story, a sanitized tale of a hero who conquered monsters and saved the day, time and time again. But what about the dark side of this demigod? What about the parts of his story that don't quite fit the traditional hero mold? That's what we're here to explore, the unvarnished truth, the juicy gossip, and the uncomfortable realities that make Hercules a far more fascinating and relatable figure. So why should you care about the dark side of Hercules? Well, my friend, it's because his story is a reflection of our own. We've all got our own demons to battle, our own flaws to confront, and our own vulnerabilities to overcome. And if we can learn anything from Hercules, it's that even the most seemingly invincible among us can struggle, can stumble, and can rise again stronger and wiser for it. Over the next few chapters, we'll delve into the lesser-known aspects of Hercules' life, the parts that don't quite fit the traditional hero narrative. We'll explore his troubled childhood, his anger issues, his treatment of women, and his role in Greek colonialism. We'll examine how his flaws and mistakes made him a more nuanced and human character, and how his vulnerabilities make him a more relatable figure. So, if you're ready to trade in your rose-tinted glasses for a pair of clear, unvarnished lenses, then join me on this journey into the bitter truth, the dark side of Hercules. It's time to get real, folks, and explore the complexities of a hero who was, in fact, all too human. Word count, 2046. Chapter 1. The Abandoned Son. Hercules' story begins with a scandalous affair between Zeus, the king of the gods, and Alcmene, a mortal woman. Zeus, being the charming and cunning god that he was, disguised himself as Alcmene's husband and spent the night with her. The result of this union was Hercules, a demigod with incredible strength and potential. But here's the thing, Zeus' wife Hera was not exactly thrilled about her husband's extramarital affair. In fact, she was downright furious, and, as the queen of the gods, she had the power to make her wrath known. Hera's anger towards Hercules was so intense that she attempted to kill him as an infant by sending 2 serpents to his crib. Luckily, Hercules' incredible strength kicked in, and he strangled the serpents, saving his own life. This was only the beginning of Hercules' troubled childhood. His father, Zeus, was absent for most of his life, and his mother, Alcmene, was left to raise him on her own. Hercules' stepfather, Amphitryon, was not exactly the most supportive or loving figure either. In fact, he was known to be quite cruel and abusive. Growing up, Hercules was constantly reminded of his illegitimacy and his demigod status. He was an outsider among both mortals and gods, never quite fitting in. This sense of abandonment and rejection would haunt Hercules throughout his life, influencing his actions and decisions in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. Now, you might be thinking, but wait, wasn't Hercules a hero? Didn't he do great things and save the day? And yes, he did. But that's exactly the point. Hercules' heroism was, in many ways, a coping mechanism for his deep-seated insecurities and fears. His need for validation and acceptance drove him to seek out challenges and prove himself, often to the point of exhaustion and self-destruction. Hercules' abandonment issues also played a significant role in his relationships with women. His mother, Alcmene, was the only constant female figure in his life, and even she was often absent or distant. This lack of healthy female influence led Hercules to objectify and mistreat women, seeing them as mere conquests or trophies rather than as equals or partners. One of the most notable examples of this is his treatment of Deianira, a princess he married and later abandoned. Hercules' actions towards Deianira were nothing short of cruel and manipulative, using his strength and charm to get what he wanted from her. And when she finally stood up for herself and refused to be treated like a doormat, Hercules responded with anger and violence. This pattern of behavior continued throughout Hercules' life, with him often prioritizing his own desires and needs over the well-being and agency of the women around him. It's a painful reminder that even the most seemingly heroic among us can struggle with toxic masculinity and a deep-seated need for control. As we move forward in Hercules' story, we'll see how his abandonment issues and toxic behavior towards women continue to shape his actions and decisions. We'll explore how his flaws and mistakes made him a more nuanced and human character, and how his vulnerabilities make him a more relatable figure. But for now, let's take a moment to acknowledge the complexity of Hercules' character. He's not just a one-dimensional hero. He's a multidimensional being with flaws, fears, and vulnerabilities. And it's precisely this complexity that makes his story so compelling and relatable. Chapter 2: The Murderer. Hercules' story takes a dark turn as he faces one of his most significant challenges yet. His wife, Megara, and their children are killed by his own hands, a tragedy that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The circumstances leading up to this event are complex and multifaceted. Hercules' father, Zeus, had been at odds with the goddess Hera, who resented Hercules for being the son of Zeus and a mortal woman. Hera's anger and jealousy simmered for years, eventually boiling over into a plot to destroy Hercules' family. Hera drove Hercules mad, causing him to hallucinate and see his family as enemies. In a fit of rage, he killed Megara and their children, believing they were threats to his life. When he regained his sanity, he was met with the horrifying reality of what he had done. The weight of his actions crushed Hercules. He was consumed by grief, guilt, and shame. He had always prided himself on his strength and bravery, but now he felt like a monster. He wandered the earth, seeking redemption and a way to atone for his heinous crime. This tragic event marks a turning point in Hercules' story. His actions were no longer driven by pride and ambition, but by a deep sense of sorrow and regret. He began to see the world in a different light, recognizing the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of his own actions. Hercules' journey towards redemption takes him to the city of Tiryns, where he meets King Eurystheus. Eurystheus, aware of Hercules' past, sets him a series of 12 labors, tasks so daunting that they seem impossible. These labors become Hercules' chance for redemption, an opportunity to prove himself worthy of forgiveness. The first labor is to slay the Nemean lion, a beast so fierce that no one has been able to defeat it. Hercules faces his fears and confronts the lion, emerging victorious. This triumph marks the beginning of his long journey towards redemption. As Hercules completes each labor, he faces new challenges and confronts his own demons. He battles the Hydra, a serpent-like monster with multiple heads, and captures the Ceryneian hind, a golden deer sacred to the gods. With each success, he inches closer to redemption. However, the labors also come with a personal cost. Hercules is forced to confront the consequences of his actions, reliving the tragedy of his family's death. He begins to understand the true extent of his own vulnerability and the devastating impact of his mistakes. Through his labors, Hercules comes to realize that true strength lies not in physical prowess but in the ability to confront one's flaws and weaknesses. He learns to accept responsibility for his actions and to seek forgiveness, not just from others but also from himself. The story of Hercules serves as a powerful reminder that even the strongest among us can falter. His journey towards redemption is a testament to the human capacity for growth, forgiveness, and redemption. As we continue to explore Hercules' story, we will see how his labors shape him into a hero, not just of physical strength but also of moral courage and resilience. Chapter 3: The Sexist Savior. Hercules' treatment of women is a significant aspect of his story, and one that is often glossed over or romanticized. But the truth is, Hercules' behavior towards women was problematic, to say the least. He objectified and mistreated them, seeing them as mere conquests or trophies rather than as equals or partners. One of the most notable examples of this is his encounter with the Amazon warrior Hippolyta. Hercules was sent to retrieve her golden girdle, a task that seemed simple enough. But when he arrived in Amazon territory, he was met with resistance from Hippolyta and her warriors. Instead of respecting their boundaries and autonomy, Hercules resorted to violence and coercion, eventually killing Hippolyta and stealing her girdle. This encounter is often portrayed as a heroic feat, with Hercules emerging victorious over the savage Amazons. But the truth is, this encounter was a clear example of toxic masculinity and sexual entitlement. Hercules saw Hippolyta and her warriors as nothing more than obstacles to be overcome, rather than as human beings with agency and autonomy. This pattern of behavior continued throughout Hercules' life, with him often prioritizing his own desires and needs over the well-being and agency of the women around him. He was a classic example of a nice guy who felt entitled to women's bodies and affections, and who became violent and angry when they refused to comply. But what's even more disturbing is that this behavior was often condoned and encouraged by the gods themselves. Zeus, in particular, was notorious for his own sexual entitlement and abuse of power, and he often rewarded Hercules for his conquests and mistreatment of women. This is a painful reminder that even in ancient mythology, women's bodies and agency were not their own. They were seen as property, as conquests, as trophies to be won and lost. And it's a stark reminder of the work that still needs to be done to combat toxic masculinity and sexual entitlement in our own society. As we move forward in Hercules' story, we'll see how his treatment of women continues to shape his actions and decisions. We'll explore how his flaws and mistakes made him a more nuanced and human character, and how his vulnerabilities make him a more relatable figure. But for now, let's take a moment to acknowledge the harm that Hercules' behavior caused. Let's recognize the pain and trauma that he inflicted on the women around him, and let's work towards creating a world where women's bodies and agency are respected and valued. Chapter 4: The Colonizer. Hercules' story is not just one of personal struggle and triumph, but also of cultural and political significance. As a demigod, he was seen as a symbol of Greek power and dominance, and his actions often reflected and reinforced the values and beliefs of ancient Greek society. One of the most problematic aspects of Hercules' story is his role as a colonizer and imperialist. He was often called upon by the gods to civilize and pacify the surrounding lands, which usually meant conquering and subjugating the native populations. One of the most notable examples of this is his encounter with the mythical city of Troy. Hercules was sent by the gods to liberate the city from the rule of King Laomedon, who was seen as a tyrant and a threat to Greek power. But instead of liberating the city, Hercules ended up sacking and destroying it, killing many of its inhabitants and enslaving the rest. This encounter is often portrayed as a heroic feat, with Hercules emerging victorious over the barbarian Trojans. But the truth is, this encounter was a clear example of cultural imperialism and genocide. Hercules saw the Trojans as inferior and uncivilized, and he believed it was his duty to impose Greek culture and values on them, by force if necessary. This pattern of behavior continued throughout Hercules' life, with him often being called upon by the gods to civilize and pacify other lands and peoples. He was a classic example of a colonialist, who believed that his culture and values were superior to all others, and who saw it as his duty to impose them on the rest of the world. But what's even more disturbing is that this behavior was often condoned and encouraged by the gods themselves. Zeus, in particular, was notorious for his own imperialist ambitions, and he often rewarded Hercules for his conquests and subjugation of other peoples. This is a painful reminder that even in ancient mythology, the values of colonialism and imperialism were already present and already harmful. It's a stark reminder of the work that still needs to be done to combat these values and to promote cultural understanding and respect. As we move forward in Hercules' story, we'll see how his role as a colonizer and imperialist continues to shape his actions and decisions. We'll explore how his flaws and mistakes made him a more nuanced and human character, and how his vulnerabilities make him a more relatable figure. But for now, let's take a moment to acknowledge the harm that Hercules' actions caused. Let's recognize the pain and trauma that he inflicted on the people he colonized and subjugated. And let's work towards creating a world where all cultures and peoples are respected and valued. Chapter 5: The Vulnerable Demigod. Hercules' story is not just one of strength and courage, but also of vulnerability and weakness. Despite his demigod status and incredible physical strength, Hercules was a complex and multifaceted character, with a deep sense of insecurity and self-doubt. One of the most significant examples of Hercules' vulnerability is his struggle with his own identity. As a demigod, he was caught between two worlds: the mortal world of his mother, Alcmene, and the divine world of his father, Zeus. He was never fully accepted by either world, and this sense of not belonging left him feeling isolated and alone. Hercules' vulnerability is also evident in his relationships with others. Despite his many conquests and achievements, he was a deeply insecure and needy person who craved validation and acceptance from those around him. He was often drawn to strong and powerful women, like Deianira and Hippolyta, who could match his strength and intensity. But these relationships were often marked by possessiveness, jealousy, and violence, as Hercules struggled to control and dominate those he loved. Hercules' vulnerability is also seen in his struggles with his own emotions. He was a deeply feeling person who was often overwhelmed by his own anger, sadness, and fear. He struggled to express these emotions in a healthy way, often turning to violence and destruction instead. This is evident in his famous rage episodes, where he would destroy entire cities and armies in a fit of anger. Despite his vulnerability, Hercules was also a deeply compassionate and empathetic person. He was known for his kindness and generosity, and was often called upon by the gods to help those in need. He was a true hero who used his strength and power to protect and serve others, rather than to dominate and control. Hercules' vulnerability is a powerful reminder that even the strongest and bravest among us can struggle with insecurity and self-doubt. It shows us that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness, and that it's okay to be vulnerable and open with others. As we move forward in Hercules' story, we'll see how his vulnerability continues to shape his actions and decisions. We'll explore how his flaws and mistakes made him a more nuanced and human character, and how his vulnerabilities make him a more relatable figure. But for now, let's take a moment to acknowledge Hercules' vulnerability. Let's recognize that even the most seemingly invincible among us can struggle with insecurity and self-doubt. And let's work towards creating a world where vulnerability is seen as a strength, not a weakness. Chapter 6: The Relatable Flaw. Hercules' story continues to unfold, revealing a complex and multifaceted character. His struggles with anger, vulnerability, and redemption have made him a relatable figure, far removed from the one-dimensional hero of myth and legend. As he completes his 12 labors, Hercules faces a new challenge, the challenge of self-reflection. He begins to realize that his actions, though driven by a desire for redemption, have caused harm to others. He starts to question whether his methods have been justified, and whether his quest for redemption has only led to more suffering. Hercules' introspection is triggered by his encounter with the hero Theseus. Theseus, known for his bravery and wisdom, confronts Hercules about his actions, pointing out the harm he has caused to innocent people. Hercules is taken aback, forced to confront the consequences of his own actions. For the first time, Hercules sees himself through the eyes of others. He realizes that his anger and aggression, though stemming from a desire for redemption, have only led to more pain and suffering. He begins to understand that true strength lies not in physical power, but in the ability to control one's emotions and actions. Hercules' newfound self-awareness leads him to seek a new path, one of compassion and understanding. He begins to use his strength and influence to protect and serve others, rather than seeking to dominate and control. He becomes a true hero, not just of physical strength, but of moral courage and wisdom. As Hercules' story comes to a close, we are left with a profound message. True heroism lies not in physical power or dominance, but in the ability to confront one's flaws and weaknesses. It lies in the capacity for self-reflection, compassion, and understanding. Hercules' journey, though marked by struggles and mistakes, has led him to a place of true strength and heroism. In the end, Hercules' story is not just a myth or legend, but a reflection of our own human struggles and triumphs. His flaws and weaknesses make him a relatable figure, a reminder that even the strongest among us can falter. His journey towards redemption and self-awareness serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of compassion, understanding, and moral courage.